greatness is not big egos. Greatness comes from being so comfortable within yourself that you're able to express that in a way that can help other people too.
Hello and welcome to the Biohackher Podcast. I'm Azra, your host and founder of Biohackher. I'm an integrated nutrition health coach specializing in longevity for women, a health and wellness journalist, writer, corporate consultant, and a biohacking advocate. Biohackher is a space where we can explore ways to optimize our health to live well longer. Whether it's through improving our nutrition, exercising, cryotherapy, supplementation, technology, and more, I'll be bringing you information and interviews with the best longevity experts to help you understand what you can do to optimize your health, prevent disease, and slow down or even reverse the symptoms of aging by taking control of your unique bio-individuality. Want to know more? Let's dive in. Hey guys, before we jump into the next episode, I wanted to take a quick moment of your time to tell you about the next Live Well Longer retreat that I'll be co-hosting with Camilla Thompson. If you've been feeling the pull to pause, reset, and reconnect with the woman you're becoming, then this is your moment. Join us for the next Live Well Longer retreat, which will be held from the 1st to the 6th of May in 2026 at the beautiful Reviva Resort in Bali. This isn't just a holiday. It's a transformational experience designed to help you reset your biology, restore your balance, and reimagine what aging well truly means. Across 6 days, you'll immerse yourself in restorative practices, nourishing food, movement, workshops, deep rest, and soul-level connection with a community of like-minded women who are all committed to living well longer. It's the kind of retreat that stays with you long after you return home. The clarity, the shifts, the confidence, the reconnection to your healthiest, most grounded self. If you're ready to invest in your well-being and step into a new chapter feeling renewed and inspired, I'd love you to join us. Register your interest now at livewelllongerretreats.com. Spots are limited. Now on to the podcast. Sarah, you are a producer for the Hamish and Andy show. And then you got to a point in your life where you decided you needed to change directions. And then you became a mindset coach. And now you're the host of your own very successful podcast. At what point in your life did you feel the need to make that change, and what was going on in your life when you realized that it wasn't working, you weren't living a life of greatness or just functioning at the time?
Yeah, so the job that I completely burnt out in, I think you're referring to, was actually a radio job that I did, working with some different people. And I, at that time, was a very different person to what I am now. So I started working for many years as a producer, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I climbed the ropes of the corporate ladder, and I ended up doing a Sunday night show that was very successful, and they ended up turning it into a breakfast show. And it was a breakfast show that we did from Melbourne, but it went into Sydney. And one thing about like breakfast radio shows is they're like the creme de la creme of the station. So to have a good breakfast radio show will then allow the station to do well throughout the day. The reason I tell you that is because that shows that there is a lot of, pressure and significance put on the breakfast radio show. So it was a huge role. And at the time, it was, more money than I had ever gotten paid. It was very glamorous in what we would do. And I was really excited about it. But only a few months into doing that role, I suddenly became extremely exhausted. And one thing about breakfast radio means that the hours are aligned to breakfast. So I'd have to be up at 3 a.m, 5 days a week. And I had a 2 and a 4-year-old at the time. So obviously that was, when you've got a 2 and a 4-year-old, you're having to take care of them. And that within itself is such a big role, let alone 5 days a week, waking up at 3 a.m. And it was just tough. It was a really tough role. And I, after month upon month of doing that, just became completely and utterly exhausted. And it wasn't till I one day got really, really unwell with the flu and I wasn't able to go to work for a week, where I found myself just reflecting on how my life had become, to me, so empty, and I felt miserable, and how that had been, even though I was doing a job that I thought that I loved. And so on reflection, I realized that I was doing absolutely no inner work on myself. Everything was external, get the big job, get the big paycheck. But it wasn't as fulfilling as what I had thought it would be. And, a lot of growth comes from having these dark night of the souls, which I was going through at the time. And that allowed me to then reflect, because I was at rock bottom, and say to myself, what do I need to do to be able to move forward? And for me, I had always been very interested in personal development work, the idea of the mind body connection, why some people are happier than others. And so it led me down this rabbit hole of researching and finding out as much information I could about psychology and how the mind works. And honestly, after such a short period of time, my life just started changing in, ways that were still a little bit tumultuous, but they were moving me on the right path. And I ended up leaving that radio role and moved into podcasting. And that's when I started working with Hamish and Andy, where my life started transforming. But more importantly, only after a few months of working with them, I came up with the idea of my podcast, which is called The Life of Greatness, because I wanted to give back to others and teach them what I had learned. And so then after that, years more of producing and my podcast getting to a stage where it was big enough to kind of move from doing producing to that full time, I ended up moving into doing A Life of Greatness full time, and I'm a mindset coach and a keynote speaker, and I've written a book and all these other things. And I get to focus now on helping others lead a great life.
Was there a moment that you felt you outgrew that version of yourself and that it looked good on paper, but it felt really wrong in your body? Because that's a really big decision and a change to make, and a big change to make in your life as well. Particularly, you would have gone through lots of studying to get there, and me being a former broadcast journalist as well, I know how difficult it is in the broadcast industry, particularly in radio breakfast. There's a lot of doors that you have to knock down to get into that space.
Yeah, that's a great question. I knew through the work that I was doing, for change to occur, you need to change. It's a saying, and it's so unbelievably true. For change to occur, you need to change. And the version of myself that hit the rock bottom, to me, that was a version of myself that I knew I couldn't hold on to anymore because I was miserable. So it was in that moment, and through the research I was doing, I knew that I had to shift my path. And doing that, my values stayed the same, but the version of me died that day, and it kept dying on the journey that I was going through. And, we hear these things like I was reborn again, and it sounds so cliche and cheesy, but essentially that's what happened. But for change to occur, you need to change. That has to happen. You can't, there's that again, that Einstein quote where it says, doing the same thing over and over again is insanity and expecting a different outcome. So if you expect different outcomes, you can't keep doing the same thing again and again. And I wanted different outcomes, and I knew for different outcomes that I needed, then I needed to change myself. I needed to work on myself. I needed to work on the negative thoughts that were consuming my mind, the worrying that was consuming my mind. I needed to shift away from people that I felt that I wasn't able to give myself to anymore, and who I didn't feel was really, moving forward in what I wanted my life to become. So there were different things that I needed to navigate from a work perspective. I needed to leave that job to be able to do something different. So I really ended up changing my whole life. As I said, my values obviously stayed the same, but there were a lot of things that needed to shift to be able to move on to another path.
What do you think people misunderstand the most about the choices you've made to move on to another path and to now be a mindset coach?
To be honest with you, I didn't get any negative feedback. If anything, it was all positive, and I think people liked this version of me that they were seeing because it was probably a happier, kinder, nicer person. And I found that I met a lot of new people, people that were on a similar wavelength to me. I mean, like attracts like. So you open the door for like a lot of new, beautiful people to come in. So it was only quite positive, and especially because I was then in a public arena sharing my story and obviously with my podcast. Then I was getting a lot of feedback from people who had been on a similar journey or people I knew that were really interested in the work I was doing. So it actually was only plus plus more so than anything negative. I mean, it's always hard to move away from friends that you've known for a long period of time. But as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't serving them as much as they weren't serving me. So, that works for the better for both parties.
Yeah, definitely. When you are speaking to people and you're interviewing them about what greatness means to them and the lives that they've led in terms of their achievements, if greatness had nothing to do with achievement, what do you think it would be?
I think greatness comes from within, right? So it's about the way that your internal world works. And then that is then reflected a lot of the time in your external. So, one thing about greatness is, are you able to love yourself? And therefore, if you are, you're able to give that love to others as well. It's very hard to love other people if you don't love yourself. The greatness is also comes in being of service. We can do as much as we want with our own lives, but if we're not helping others as well, then how fulfilling really is it? And I think if we really sit with those things about finding love and allowing ourselves to feel like we're enough, because that's always the biggest barrier for a lot of people, feeling that they're not enough. Um, when we can come to terms with doing that and aligning our words with our actions and making sure that our values are aligned in whatever it is that we're doing and able to serve others through the work that we're doing, that's, to me, I find with the people I interview, that's the true greatness that comes forth.
Because a lot of people often think that greatness means you have to be really high functioning. What are your thoughts on that?
No, not at all. I think greatness, some of the quietest people in the room are definitely the greatest. I mean, the amount of times I think you think of someone that you know and they'll be talking about something and they don't use many words to be able to explain it. They don't say something unless really they're spoken to or they have something interesting to say. They're the people that you remember more than the loudest people in the room. Greatness is not big egos. Greatness comes from being so comfortable within yourself that you're able to express that in a way that can help other people too.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention egos because sometimes I think we see that people are not really living their life without realizing it. What's a sign that you think that someone is living someone else's life? And what's the most common nice girl habit that you see that's really secretly wrecking women's health? Because we do tend to, as women, try to either outperform each other or try to, beat the boys or whatever it might be. Particularly in the corporate sector, it can be quite a dog-eat-dog, approach as well. Hopefully, I'm starting to see that changing. But your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think it's more so as a person, what are you comfortable with? I mean, we never want to throw someone else in the dirt or do something that doesn't align with our values. I mean, I would never want someone to talk bad about me behind my back, so I wouldn't talk badly about others behind their back. I think you have to think about how you move through the world and what values again you hold, because if you really want to achieve great things in life and have great people around you, then you have to be a reflection of that. And so I think there is plenty of people that walk through this world being chameleons, and not living the life maybe that they wanted to live. They're living a life, for someone else to make someone else happy. And that's a sad thing. But we as individuals need to realize that for ourselves. And sometimes people never do,
Mm.
right? Some people never work on themselves. And it's a sad thing. They can go to the end of their lives and think, I didn't live a life for me. I lived the life that my husband wanted me to lead or my parents wanted me to lead. Bronnie Ware writes about it in the, Five Regrets of the Dying, the number one regret being, I didn't lead the life I wanted to lead. I led someone else's life to make them happy. And, a lot of people do that. And so I suppose it's conversations like these that you hope people hear, and then they're able to make changes within their lives. But I do think it is quite a common thing.
Yeah, agreed. And I guess it comes down to what sort of boundaries we also place in our lives, because, again, I think women can struggle with placing boundaries in their lives, particularly around their health. If you had to prescribe one boundary as medicine, what do you think that would be?
I think doing inner work on yourself is a big thing. And if the boundary is putting time aside to be able to do it, if it's waking up earlier in the morning so you can get meditation in, or doing it in the afternoon when the kids get home from school, if that's the only time you can do it, and closing the door so you're able to get the 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, however long you meditate for, being able to get that time. I think a boundary for self-care is an absolute needed thing. It might be a week away to go to a retreat or whatever it is. Having some time aside to be able to do some inner work is absolutely necessary. And I think definitely a boundary that women should think about putting up. But also, a lot of women that I speak to, they're giving a lot to other people. So they'll be giving a lot to their friends or their family, and they don't give a lot of themselves self-care. And I think when we look at think, oh, it's such a selfish thing, like we're taking time for ourselves to do something, and we're not there for the people that need us for those few hours or a week or whatever it is you choose to do. And I'll always say this to them: when you're working on yourself, be it through meditation or any form of personal development work, going, like we said, to a retreat or whatever you decide that it is for you, being able to work on yourself is then allowing yourself to show up as a better person. And when you show up as a better person, then you give more to your family. Your children receive you in a way that is a lot more pleasurable than probably being angry or tired or whatever it is. So that self-care, that time that you're putting aside for yourself, that boundary that you're setting up, ends up being something that you can give to everyone else through whatever it is that you're learning. So we need to look at it as not being selfish self-care. It's allowing us to be the best person for everyone that surrounds us.
Mm. Do you think we're addicted to stress? And if so, how do we break it without completely blowing up our lives?
Look, I think some people are definitely addicted to stress and they don't realize it. It's the idea also that like misery loves company, and complaining, and then I can complain to my friends who are also complaining, and then we have something that we can both complain about together. But is that something that you really want to do? Like, you need to reflect and wonder, okay, maybe my complaining is not making me feel good, and maybe I don't want to hear about everyone else's complaints as well. And again, that takes us back to the idea of, for change to occur, we need a change. One of the first chapters in my book is about conscious awareness, because if you're not conscious of your thought patterns, the words that you say, and your actions, you can't change anything. And when suffering occurs, when stress occurs, these addictive tendencies that we can be used to doing, if we're not conscious of what we're thinking, what we're saying, and our actions, we can't change anything. So I think from being addicted to stress or being addicted to suffering or whatever it is that you feel that you're addicted to, or, you wouldn't even think that you're actually addicted to it. You're just in it and it becomes your norm. Again, from a conscious awareness perspective, it's taking a step back and going, okay, I don't feel so great today. I feel sad or I feel angry or whatever it is. What have I been thinking that's led me to that point? And when we're consciously aware of our thoughts, we are able to then stop them and change them into better feeling thoughts. But unless we have that conscious awareness piece, then it's so much easier to sit in a negative mindset and a stressed out mindset and a suffering mindset.
What's your advice to people who might have family members that have that suffering mindset or that victim mindset and they just won't change, but that family member might keep trying to change them? Should they keep doing that or should they just step back?
When I've been asked this question before, I always say this: there's no point trying to change people if they don't want to change, because that only ends up frustrating them. It can move them further away from any change, and it also upsets you and frustrates you. But you can be the change. So if they see you living a life where you're not stressed out and you're happy and look at that and then want to change. So you worry more about yourself rather than changing people that don't want to change. And that's always the best thing that you can do. Because as I said, when you're trying to change people that don't want to change, it doesn't end up well for either you or them.
You've spoken a lot over the years about overcoming self-limiting beliefs. What's the most common belief that you think keeps women stuck in stress cycles?
I think it's what I spoke about earlier, which is our enoughness. And it's for men and for women. The idea that I'm not enough. I'm not to apply for that job. I'm not good enough to be friends with that person. I'm not good enough for a relationship, whatever it is, or I'm not pretty enough for this, or I'm not smart enough. All of that falls down to I am not enough. And when we can change that mindset of I'm not enough, then that opens the doors for anything. Because what's really interesting is there are beliefs that are formed. So we have a belief system about ourselves, about others, about the way that we walk through the world. A belief is just a thought you keep thinking. And that's so interesting. A belief is just a thought that you keep thinking. And then you say to yourself, okay, so why wouldn't I then change my beliefs to beliefs that actually help me and nurture me through life, rather than beliefs that are negative and don't allow me to move forward? And there's so many things, for the idea of like what I said, I'm not enough. There would be so many proof points in your life to tell you you are enough. And I'm sure there's a million proof points out there to tell you you're not enough as well. But why not try to focus on the ones that show you are enough, because you want a better belief system than the ones that you are not enough, and give it a go and see how you go with believing that you are enough, and seeing the people that you're friends with, the amazing work that you've done, the kids that you've been able to raise who are, great people. There would be plenty of things in people's lives to show them that they are enough. But again, it takes the conscious awareness piece for people to realize that they're even doing this behavior or thinking those things. And that's why we always start there.
You've touched on already a little bit on how women are so great at taking care of everyone else except themselves. What's the cost long term, do you think, of continuing with that approach and that mindset for women?
When we're taking care of everyone except for ourselves, then you end up in a situation where you're completely burning out. I mean, that's what happened to me. And it wasn't for me as much as taking care of everyone. It was more so I wasn't taking care of myself. But that's what will happen if you don't do any work on yourself, right? And again, it goes back to being able to find time to spend on yourself, and things like meditation, um, again, watching your thought patterns, taking the time to really think about what you're thinking and shift from negative to positive, and doing that constantly. Those are the things that allow you to be able to live a life that is going to allow you to flourish rather than the life that you're living now. So it's not about not caring for the people in your life. because that is extremely, extremely important. But it's allowing you to be able to have a full cup. So then you can, give some of that cup to other people too. If you're working on a half filled cup and not looking after yourself, it's never going to end well because you end up burning out. And if there are people that are relying on you, then you need to have that full cup.
Mm. I think it's interesting because I hear so many women saying that they feel exhausted all the time. They come along to our retreats as an example, and they almost collapse the moment that they arrive at the retreat. And it is because they are propping up everybody else rather than putting themselves first, as you've highlighted. What do you think is more exhausting for women? Doing too much or suppressing what they're actually feeling? Because I think that a lot of women tend to suppress what they feel and just keep
Yeah.
doing, right?
I think it's a combination of both. I think, and it's great, this conversation, because it all entwines with one another. We were talking about the deathbed and living the life that other people want us to live. And I think it really goes back to that too, in the sense that you're being the mother that you think your kids need you to be. You're being the wife that your husband needs you to be, or the perfect child for your parents. And again, it's about making sure everyone else is okay rather than yourself. So I think being able to really take the time to even just sit down and write down what it is that makes you happy, what it is that gives you purpose, what lights up your heart. What is it that you want to do? And when you have that, move in that direction. And that's not something that sometimes can happen overnight. It takes time. And I coach a lot of people in this area, a lot of CEOs who are in this big jobs, and they reflect and say, I'm completely unhappy. I would rather do something else that is not aligned to this, but I've been in it for such a long period of time. It's earning me great money, but it doesn't light me up anymore. And we know without having purpose, without having meaning in our life, those are the pillars of happiness. So really, for women who feel like they're kind of suppressing either their lifestyle or they're not able to express themselves, to really sit down with themselves and write down what it is that gives them happiness, what lights them up, what they think their purpose will be. And sometimes that can take a while to actually find that, and that's okay. You might feel like you don't have a purpose, but what is it that lights you up and fills your heart with joy? And then you can start there.
Mm. Because it can be confronting when you're trying to do that type of self-assessment, can't it? And I think that,
Absolutely.
yeah, so and quite often I think negative thinking kicks back in at that point in time because of that self-doubt or imposter syndrome or whatever it might be. What are some tips that you can give our listeners on how they can cut that negative thinking off right from the get-go, and switch over to that positive mindset thinking?
Well, as far as negative and positive, I always talk to this. If you have a negative thought that comes up, it's hard to take it away completely, but you can move to a better feeling thought. So I always say to people, what is something that brings you joy and love and lights you up? And say it could be your dog or a relationship or a workplace or a retreat, whatever it is. Have that already in your mind. So say, for example, it might be your partner. You love your partner to bits. They light you up. Whenever you think about your partner, you feel nothing but joy. When the negative thought comes up, you replace it with a better feeling thought, being your partner. Every single time, and this can happen 60 to 70 to 100 times a day, the negative thought comes up, you replace it with the better feeling thought, being your partner. And you're doing that constantly over and over again. The more that you do it, the more that the mind starts to move in that direction of positive rather than negative. And we know this through neuroplasticity, that the brain will rewire itself up until the day that we die. And knowing that, okay, I know that now, scientists have realized that, then how are we going to rewire it? We need to be consciously aware of our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, and then align them with the way that we want to. So, that's just a strategy of when we get into that suffering mindset or that very negative mindset, to be able to switch and change to the better feeling thought. And as I said, you'll need to do it constantly when you first start doing it. But as the mind starts to rewire itself from negative to positive, it will then move in that direction. But we need to constantly be watching our thoughts. We can't do this for a number of months and then stop doing it. It needs to be something that you're constantly doing.
How do you set boundaries when you're scared of being disliked or called too much?
I think to be a person that moves through the world, there always, doesn't matter who it is going to have people that dislike them. You're always going to have it. You could be the nicest person on the earth, have done nothing to anyone, and you'll still have people that dislike you. They might be jealous of you. They might think you're too nice, whatever it is. The first thing you need to do is get over the fact that some people won't like you or may not like you. That's absolutely fine. Not everyone's going to like you. And you just need to come to terms with that. And when you do that, if you feel that there's a boundary that's being stepped over and you place a boundary there, that's absolutely okay. Because as I said, not everyone's going to like you the whole time, but you need to be happy within yourself and you need to do things that work towards what your ethics and your morals are. And if that is putting up a boundary because someone's stepping over that, then so be it. And if they're not going to like you because of that, well, you have to think to yourself, would I rather stay within my ethics and within what I feel is right? And if this person's not going to like me for it, then so be it. So that's how I would tackle that.
Yeah, great. I often see in the corporate work that I do that leaders, executives struggle with being vulnerable, that they feel that they have to be strong, assertive, or aggressive. Do you see vulnerability as a skill set? And if so, how would you recommend people practice it safely?
I look at vulnerability as being a skill set, but I'm not so sure so much in the corporate world. I think when you're in the corporate world, different or the business world to your personal life. And I think being vulnerable with friends and families, of course, like that's you trust them enough to be able to show up as your authentic self and be able to share information with them that's vulnerable as the way that they would share information with you that's vulnerable. But I think in the corporate world, there's no need to share personal things to people a lot of the time. It's a corporate world. And there's one thing to be in a work environment and there's one thing to be in a personal environment. And they're two very separate things. And I see some people in corporate environments overshare. And I would actually say to not do that. It's not saying that you can't talk about things in your life, but also you've got to remember you're at work and it's a very separate environment to being with your good friends or your families. And I think that's something to really think about when it comes to vulnerability. I think vulnerability is a beautiful thing, but I don't think it's sometimes relevant in a workplace environment.
What do you think is the difference between being vulnerable and oversharing?
Well, I don't know that there's so much difference between them. And that's why I think in a corporate environment, you would try to not do either of them. You know, when I say oversharing and vulnerability, I think it depends on where you are. So, you know, when we talk to our friends and family, we would never be oversharing if we trust those people and we're talking it in an environment that we feel safe in. Because if we tell people to be vulnerable and then we put them in a position where they're not safe, that can really blow up in people's faces, right? And we don't want that for people. So when it comes to vulnerability, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I think it's such a beautiful thing. But I think you have to really think about the environment you're in and the people that you're around. That's very important because the last thing you want to do is share some really personal information about yourself and it didn't land right with people that you couldn't trust, because then that puts you in a position that's not ideal. You've then given information to people that you don't trust. So I think being vulnerable, as I said, is a great thing, but you need to ensure you're with the right people when you do it.
We've spoken a lot today about creating change in our life and the way to go about that and honouring what our passion is. Personally, what's one truth that you feel you've avoided for years because it would have required you to change your life?
To be honest with you, I don't know that there is, because I really, when I decided that I would change who I was, or more so, I would move into a space of changing my life a lot, that mean doing a lot of different things to what I had used to be doing. And so when I did that, I always now move through the world in a way that aligns with my values. And because I do that, there really isn't anything that I feel I should be doing that I'm not, because I will have those hard conversations with myself. And if I think something is unaligned, I will move away from it, or I will not be one to sort of take it on, or if it's with a person, not be one to sort of engage with that person anymore. So I've made a real conscious effort to do that, because I know what not doing that does with your life, because that was, how I lived my life for many, many years. So I'm very conscious about the way that I move through life, and what I align with myself and my beliefs, and what I do with myself as far as moving forward. I'm very conscious of those things.
Mm. If greatness had a daily protocol, what are the 5 non-negotiables?
As far as non-negotiables, I would say absolutely meditation, because that is a game changer, and it allows you to be able to quieten a mind that I know a lot of us who might be in the corporate environment, or just working, or, even who have kids and they're running a family and a household, being able to spend the time in quiet, again, allows you to then, in your eyes open life, have a mind that's not running at 100 miles an hour, and not being so reactive to other people in your life, because you take the time to really think about what your answer is going to be. That would be number one. The second thing would be, as I mentioned, the conscious awareness piece, being really conscious of what thoughts you're thinking, the things that you're saying, and your actions. Because if we don't have conscious awareness, we're not able to change things. I think moving through the world with kindness is a big part to living a life of greatness, because when we're kind to someone, we see that reciprocated a lot of the time. And I know that kindness seems so simple and easy, and we've heard it for many years, but firstly, it doesn't cost anything. And secondly, when you're kind to someone, that puts them in a good mood, and then they're kind to the next person and the next person. And we don't know how many lives we've changed by just showing up and being a kind person. That's another thing. I think living a life that has some sort of service attached to it, so therefore giving back to other people in one way or another, always in any role that you do, or even if it's through some, volunteer work, or whatever it is that you do. It might be just calling a friend and being able to help them through a situation that they're in. Some sort of service within your life that's going to allow you to thrive and live a great life. And I think the fifth thing is, again, that piece around purpose, feeling like you have some sort of purpose and meaning. And that a lot of the time to that service piece as well. So I think if you move through your life with, kindness and meditation and having purpose and giving service and having meaning in your life, then those are definitely the 5 things that would allow you to flourish and lead a great life.
I think that you mentioned stillness as well, and I think that stillness is highly underrated in our busy world. What's your personal reset when you feel yourself slipping into anxiety or perfectionism or people pleasing? It's a meditation. Is it what you've just outlined? Those 5 key points, or
Yeah. Meditation is probably one of the biggest ones, definitely. And it's something I do nearly every single day, if not every day. I have done it for many, many, many years now. And it's something, again, that just allows me to be able to be still. And when you're still, you get to that place through meditation. You see the subconscious mind is active when you're meditating, and you see sometimes negative thoughts or things that you might not be able to access through the conscious mind, which we have day to day. But when you're in meditation, it's that subconscious mind that comes out, and you can really work through things within your life, which sounds weird because you're like, I'm in meditation. But the mind is actually quite active in meditation, because you're giving it a chance to be still, So then you see things that come up that you might not normally see. So it definitely, meditation, if I'm stressed out, if I'm overthinking, if I've had a hard day, it is definitely my go to.
Mm. What do you do when motivation's gone? How do you keep promises to yourself?
To be honest, I absolutely love what I do. You know, what a gift it is. I was thinking about this actually a lot recently, like what a gift it is to be tired or exhausted from the work that I do and the life that I've created for myself. I don't lose motivation because I love what I do. And honestly, I sit down to do work, or, there's obviously I have a few jobs, so there's a different aspects of what I do. And I have curated a life that I love. So when you're doing what you love and you're able to serve others, then the motivation is there. The lack of motivation comes when you don't like doing something. And so I don't have that because I've curated a life that I absolutely enjoy.
You've got I sense that you've got a really strong purpose because of your passion for what you do and how much you love it. Do you think that purpose is found, or do you think it's built?
I think purpose is built and found, kind of not dissimilar. It's built over time because you need to work out what it is that you love, and then you find it. Some people know their purpose straight away, and that is an amazing thing. But other people, it takes time. You might try a few things out and then you find it in the end. So I think for most people, again, it's that idea of what is it that lights you up? What is it that brings you joy? Some know it from a young age, some know it when they're older. Some people never find it because they never try to. But it is that idea of what is it in life that lights you up? And then you go from there and you find something that brings you joy.
What would you say to the woman who feels guilty about wanting more and trying to find that joy in their life, even though their life might look completely fine?
Look, I think wanting more is absolutely, that's a wonderful thing to be able to want more. And when we want more, we go and look for more. And then that opens the door to what is it again that lights us up, and what is it that brings us joy? Because if you're in the realization that you want more, you're consciously aware enough that you haven't had whatever it is that has fulfilled you. And so then it goes back again to the idea that you sit with yourself and work out what it is that may lead you down the path to light you up more. And even you're writing down a list of things. And, I always say to people, what did you like when you were young? Because when we were young, we usually, okay, this is what I really enjoy doing. What would you do if money wasn't attached to it? What are the things that you would love to do? And whatever it is out of there, you might find other things. And then you end up having this whole list of things, and you work out a way to move forward in life, or a new path, or to try something on the side. It's not shifting away completely from whatever it is that you're doing right now, but it might be, okay, I love this area of work. I'm going to try and do more writing, or whatever it is. Doesn't mean quit the job that you're in to start writing more, but maybe I'll start doing a blog on the side whilst I'm doing this other job. And then that blog gains some traction, and then you move to doing something else. So doing those things, testing things out and seeing what it is that, you want to move forward with, rather than staying where you are and knowing that you want more, but doing nothing about it.
A lot of the community, a lot of the biohacker community are midlife women. What do you think is the bravest thing a woman can do in midlife?
I think the bravest thing a woman can do in midlife is work out if they're happy or not. And that can come to you straight away. That's not something that takes a lot of time. Am I happy? Am I not? And if I'm not, what can I do about it to change? And a lot of women that listen to my podcast, A Life of Greatness, are midlife. We can see the statistics. And why that is because a lot of the time you need to move through life. You get to a point where you suddenly reflect on life. The kids are a little bit older. You're not really in the trenches as you are when they're younger. And you think, I don't know, I don't feel as happy as what I was. And so then you go out and you research and you listen to, episodes, or you read books, or you do what you need to be able to get information on how you can change your life for it to be a happier one. I think midlife is the perfect time to do that. what I always say to people is, we try not to be in crisis. Like for me, when I had the burnout, for you to realize that something needs to be changed or something really negative to happen in your life, to go, okay, I need to make a few changes, so that again, hopefully people listen to this conversation and go, you know what, maybe there are areas of my life that I need to change, or maybe there are some areas of things, or maybe there are some things that I'm doing now that aren't making me as happy as what I could be, and shifting away from that and moving towards something else. So midlife is a very common questioning what it is that you want to do and where you want to go.
Mm. You've interviewed a lot of really interesting people over the years. Out of those people, who has inspired you the most?
There's been so many amazing people, and I don't think there would be one person that I could say it would be them. As I said, there are so many. I'm going to say someone who is a little bit, no one will know who they are, which is even almost a little bit nicer. It's a man called Ephraim Finch. He's in his late 70s now, I think, and he used to actually run a morgue. And he was one of the most fascinating conversations that I've ever had on the podcast many years ago. And he'd never been on a podcast before. And basically, his life was so devoted to service and the care of other people. He just oozed this energy about him. When you were in his presence, you just felt comfortable. And I think why that stuck with me so much is because I'd never seen a person who was so devoted to service, which made them so unbelievably happy. But also, what was interesting is, of course, he cared for the families of people that had died, but he was giving service to people who were dead. He was caring for the bodies of people. He would pick them up when they had died, and he'd take them to the morgue. And, there was a whole ritual around that, and he would be there when they were buried. But the service was so significant because people who are dead can't thank you. So it's almost so selfless. And hearing his story and the fact that he devoted his life to this was probably, something that will always stay with me because it was really beautiful.
Mm. So what are 3 things that you've learned the most from your conversations to date?
Look, I think there are things, and from a biohacking perspective, I can tell you sleep is the most important thing that anyone can do with their lives. And when it comes to living a great, if you're exhausted, it doesn't matter how many pills you're taking, how many green smoothies you're having, how many runs that you're going on. If you haven't slept properly, then you're not going to show up as your best self. I know this from my own way of being. And I also know that in midlife, sometimes you don't fall asleep as easily, or things change. So I think prioritizing sleep is a huge thing. And I hear it so much from so many of the thought leaders on the podcast, but also for me in my own experience as a mindset coach, I know that sleep is the number one most important thing. I think, again, what I touched on about conscious awareness, that's extremely important. Your mind is probably the most precious thing that you have. So you need to train it in a way that it's going to add value to you. And, again, this is not from anyone in my podcast. I just know it for myself and the work that I've done. But there's a beautiful quote from a Persian poet called Rumi from the 19th century. And he says, "Why do you put yourself in prison when the door is wide open?" And he's talking about the mind. So I think when we're able to use the mind properly, it just allows us to be able to flourish in life. Those are the main things that I would talk to. But also, when it comes to other things that I've heard from thought leaders on the podcast, it would be, again, that idea of being authentic and showing up as the best person that we can be through life. And that talks about the values of living a great life, which is kindness and giving back and purpose and meaning. I've heard this all from so many people that have been on the podcast. So I would say that those were the key things.
Sounds like a real recurring theme along from great leaders. There's a lot going on in the world at the moment. There's a lot of turmoil in some quarters. a lot of misunderstanding as well. Why do you think your book, Living a Life of Greatness, needs to exist now? And what are we getting wrong about fulfilling existence?
I think, my book is good because it is evergreen. It talks about living a life of greatness, which doesn't change. I mean, we've come back to it so many times in this conversation today. It gives you the key pillars to be able to lead a great life, and it goes into the science and the mindset behind why this is. So that's why it's important, and there is not one person on the earth that wouldn't be able, I would say, to be able to read it and take something away from it, because it's something that we all need in our everyday lives. It's very simple as well. As far as, being on the planet right now, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of confusion. We're seeing a lot of awful things happen. There's always awful things happening in the world. Why it's more complicated now is because of social media and fake news and bias in the media, and depending on what channel you listen to, you're going to get a certain story. What I say to that is educate yourself enough on any issue that you understand, but then turn the media off, because the more and more you access these sort of things, the more you take them on, and the more your mindset becomes clouded, negative, and you don't want that. You don't want to walk through the world being cynical, being angry, and also not really having the facts of what's going on. So, all the pillars that we've spoken about today are able to allow you to lead a great life. But I also think being very cautious of what you're taking in from a media perspective, from a social media perspective, is really important as well. I would say don't listen to the news at night time. I haven't for years. I don't let my kids take that sort of stuff in. We don't watch TV. It's unnecessary. You know, Obviously go for it with Netflix or any of those kind of shows that bring you joy or you watch as a family. That's completely different. But I'm talking about like nightly news. It's unnecessary. So I think, again, being very conscious about those movements will allow you to lead a life that's a lot happier, especially with everything that's going on in the world.
Completely agree. What chapter did you find the hardest to write in your book because it forced you to face yourself?
Look, to be honest with you, a lot of the chapters I wrote, it was interesting. My publisher said, "Oh my goodness, you've been so vulnerable." And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh my God, have I been vulnerable?" And then looking over and thinking, "Oh, I was telling stories about this person and that person." But I felt it was necessary for the audience to be able to understand and be able to relate. So I don't know that there was one chapter in particular, but I really enjoyed writing the book. I loved writing stories about my friends and my family, and being able to allow people to have more insight into my life, because it's part memoir as well, into my life, but also into the vehicles that have helped me change in the way that I have, and the way that I teach my mindset when I coach as a mindset coach, teach my students. To be able to give that information and be able to use real life stories was very, very important for me, because I understand, being a storyteller for many years and giving keynote speeches, that people learn from storytelling. So it was important for me to include stories so people could relate to them, because when we relate to things, that's when we're able to then perhaps look at someone else's story and say, "Oh, that's really interesting. I had something similar. I'm going to find out more about what happened to them and how they moved through a very hard period." So there wasn't one particular chapter that I felt hard. It was harder because I felt I was to an extent vulnerable in majority of them. And I like that.
Yeah. It's great when you can be vulnerable in that way. And as you said, relate, for people to be able to relate to those stories. People learn better that way. Is there any key takeaway for women out of your book that you would suggest they should take on board?
Look, I think there's all the pillars that we discussed, as far as conscious awareness and meditation and finding purpose and meaning within your life. there's a big chapter on friendships that we've touched on throughout this conversation, and about who we really surround ourselves with. I think that's a big thing that, women should really think about. Who is the people that I'm keeping company with? And have a good think about that. And again, I go into depth about it in the book with very relatable stories and advice and tips as well. So that's something it's a very popular chapter, the chapter that talks about friendships and the company we keep, because I think it's a very important thing, because I think it's like 90% of people, if they're in a group of people that are divorced, then such a high chance that you'll end up being divorced. If you're in a group of people that are all overweight, usually that will reflect that you would be overweight as well. The company we keep ends up being a mirror of ourselves. If you're in a group of people that are all gossipy and saying mean things behind other people's back, you're not going to be in that group unless you do that too. So the company we keep is important.
Wrapping up, I've got one more question for you. What does it mean to you to live well longer?
What does it mean to me? To live well longer means to take care of yourself. We can live, as you know, for a long period of time, but not live well. And I think to live well longer means to be surrounded by people that we bring joy to them. I think it means doing a lot of the inner work on ourselves. So we're living a long time, but living a longer time that is happy, that is healthier. Again, that is one that's able to light other people up, and we're able to light them up. And having a group of people that surround us that we love so much and we're able to give love back to.
That's beautiful. I love that notion of lighting people up. I think that's just really lovely. Sarah, thanks so much for your time today. It's just been a delight to have you on the podcast, and I'm really, really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about biohacking, go ahead and sign up on my website at www.biohack-her.com to get a free copy of my 5 top biohacks to get you kick-started. While you're there, you can also check out my blog page for more tips on biohacking. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. Let us know if there's anyone you'd like us to talk to in particular, and we'll endeavour to get them on the podcast. Until next time, remember to live well longer.